Well, good evening. After a long day at war, I thought I would give you a situation report on things here in Pennsylvania. So, we played a total of 8 turns, post prequel, so turns that should take longer, over a period of 6.5 hours, not including the lunch hour break. So, um, this game is halfway through, more than halfway, and on par to be 2 short days, maybe a day and a half. We think it's going faster. If you remember, we're playing a two-player game. Tim is operating as the British. I'm operating as the Germans. He's leading me in IPP, but that doesn't matter. Remember, this game is all about objectives. If you look at our situation, and I'll give you kind of a blow-by-blow here in a minute. The Germans are at war with Russia, Japan, and Britain. British are at war with France and Germany. France is at war with Russia and Britain. And of course, the Russians they've gone in to attack some warlords, the Ottomans and Germany. And the technology, the British are just trouncing us in technology. And there's free technology. If you research and development first, it's free technology. I think one of the things that's probably been interesting is the ebb and flow of diplomacy. And it's just, I feel like it's a money pit. Probably the closest for the French is being able to get the Austrians on their side. Because right now, essentially, it's two majors, Britain and Russia, and their two minors, Japan and Italy. Italy hasn't declared war on anyone. That's why you didn't see them on the previous chart. But they are at war with the Germans and French and their minor power, the Ottomans. So let's look at this over here, kind of blow by blow. I'm not going to give you all of it, but the British declared war early, went into Brazil. It's obvious to me, knowing what some of the objectives are, they've got a Central Southern American objective, and they've secured that. They were moving very rapidly on bringing the Americans into their alliance. And remember, as part of I mentioned before, part of the balance of this game is to try, in a two-player game, only two major powers being in the same alliance. We don't really want anyone to be able to align that third major power, and unless somebody was crazy enough to go attack them, then they'd sling to the other alliance. But the British were working hard on the Americans. They really had them about halfway up their diplomacy chart. So my objectives lie in the east. I went into Russia. I am deep into Russia now, and but it's going to be hard to take them out. I've lost a lot of men against trench lines, both in Sweden and as well around Petrograd. But by hitting the Russians immediately became part of the British alliance. Therefore, the Americans kind of pulled out of that diplomatic discussions and deciding to stay on the side. So if somebody does go kind of thump the Russians or the Americans will join the opposite alliance. I don't see that happening. Ottomans are doing pretty well, kind of in their small sphere of influence, but that's because really the British haven't been able to pay them any mind. The British have landed a fairly large force in Picardy, so the Germans and French are going to have to do something about that. Germans trying to keep up with the naval build. There've been some very large naval engagements. Germany and France and Britain have all seen their fleets go to the bottom. Russians too, as well as the Ottomans. They don't have a boat. British are looking pretty good still, though, down here in the south, and starting to build a fleet of capable carriers up there off their home country. So a couple other things I wanted to mention to you. These objectives, they're 3 national objectives, of which you only get one, and a pool of 12 secret objectives that they all share from. According to statistics and just kind of cranking the numbers, That's 4,330,260 possible combinations to this game. If I had to say two things about this game that stand out to me so far, made me excited about it. Number one is just the fact that it is build your alliance. There is no set alliance. You have some people that might be friendly towards you, but it's not a sure thing. And like in the case with Britain and America, I kind of ruined that alliance by attacking the Russians and changing things for Britain there. But that you build your alliance. So that's one aspect. The second is there is no formula. There is no formula to this game. You have to look at this game with fresh set of eyes and try to anticipate every possible move of your enemy, more so than Global 14 or Global 36. Not take anything away from them, of course, because I've been involved with both for over 10 years, but there is no formula to win this game. You can't do this step on, these purchases on step 1, 2, 3, or turn 1, 2, 3, and on turn 7, you're going to make exactly this move. It's not going to work that way, and you can't approach this game that way. I did want to talk about placement of units. I want to talk about commanders real quick and their involvement. You see them out here. I haven't painted any of them. Every nation starts with a commander. Only the major powers get additional commanders. There's something new and different, though, about this commanders expansion. Something that my read of history tells me is a useful part of the game. There were a lot of commanders, probably because of hierarchical dynasties and just the nature of empires and this overwhelming, very large aristocratic class. Many of them went into the military, usually the second or third sons, that kind of thing. Not all of those commanders were effective. In fact, they very often had many commanders who were ineffective. So in order to have an effective commander in this game, you have to have a major factory that they are kind of tied to. That's the resourcing. And then you either have to have a fighter of some type or a destroyer, like a TBD or regular destroyer, or a motorcycle or something that provides essentially observation. That element would not participate in combat and would provide observation for that commander, thereby making them an effective commander. So if I have 5 commanders but only 3 undamaged factories, or I have commanders that aren't supported by a plane or a motorcycle, and that's right, I said motorcycle, then they are not an effective commander, and they're not going to provide the effects of plus or +1 in the attack or defense, just like you're used to in the commander's expansion. Since I mentioned it, motorcycles, yes, there's a motorcycle expansion Doug put out, I think a year or 2 ago. It's a great little expansion. So I put the motorcycle units in this game. It's an easy add, and it's an option for you. It's not like you have to have them. Artillery. I did want to mention artillery too. I've done a lot of reading in history and this time period. In fact, recently, it's just artillery. Nations could never meet their artillery requirements without considerable stocking up and preparation for great offenses. For some nations, it took them, for example, it took the Russians about 2 years to get to the point where their, what we would call control supply rate equals their required supply rate. Those are U.S. military terms for ammunition. But so their CSR did not meet their RSR, their required supply rate, unless they stockpiled it. And even then, they would fire so much artillery, it would damage their artillery tubes. So in this game, there's an artillery restriction up until a certain technology when that restriction is lifted. And the restriction is you're limited in the number of artillery you can purchase per turn. So that exists. The Global 14 units, many of them have been downgraded. I think I mentioned that in a previous video. We're calling the original infantry that you place in the setup the first generation infantry. They have a lower attack and defense rating, and then they automatically upgrade once you reach tech level 4 in the infantry line of effort or line of technology. And they automatically upgrade, which is great. But at that point, you transition from using the ubiquitous manpower icons, which are lovely, but then you have to move to factories, or you are purchasing things like colonial infantry. Speaking of colonial infantry, they're a unit that moves from first generation to second generation infantry. But also, when you move into second generation, you can only place 2 colonial infantry, and all nations have access to producing colonial infantry. So those are some of the differences. Other organizations that we have in this game, I already mentioned engineers in a previous video. We left the Gurkhas, the Texas Rangers. Think of Panzer Grenadiers for the United States, advanced mechanized infantry units. It's something we were developing for the CSA expansion. CSA expansion still hasn't released, but I think it's a wonderful unit, and it's basically a Panzer Grenadier for the United States equivalent. Weather is still in this game, so you have that consideration. We get into winter and things slow down. You can only attack 1 round, and that does provide a reprieve maybe for someone who's been backing up on the defensive and that sort of thing, but also helps the all of the attackers and kind of refit, reorganize. And then the turns. There are 3 turns per calendar year. So unlike Global 36, which is 2, it follows the Global 14 model. So those are some of the highlights that I wanted to make. I don't know if we're going to produce another video. It may be a week from now, because if we get to play between now and Christmas, it would be very little. We've learned a lot. We've made some clarifications. We found some inconsistencies between, say, a unit chart and a technology chart, and we've shored those up. Not big ones. In fact, it wasn't a conflict. It was actually just one chart said half of it and the other chart said the other half. And we wanted to make both complement each other word for word. So it's little things like that I think will kind of prove that this game, this concept, should Doug choose to publish it, it's not going to take an extraordinarily long time. Global 14, Global 36 are proven games. Their mechanics work, and it's just making sure that the mechanics seamlessly between the two work. And we've made those clarifications. I gave you some this morning when I talked about trenches. There's no mine warfare. We just took it out. We just figured it was too difficult to transition from 14 to 36 with mine warfare, and it was not much value added, so there's no mine warfare. So it's things like that will not keep the game from being published or being playable. So I don't anticipate a tremendously long development timeline. There may be lots of playtesting while we're waiting for decisions on whether to publish or not publish, or how to get this out to the community. But I will tell you, it has been a joy, and I feel more on edge about what my opponent is doing than I ever do in a Global 36 game. I mean, I get annoyed when the dice go against me, which if you ask people who play me, the dice go against me a lot. I don't know what it is. Just all my luck is found in other places, not dice rolling. So, we may end up, again, playing a lot, but I don't anticipate a long development period before this is available to the community. So here's to you. Have a happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and just enjoy your family and friends and your gaming experiences. Thanks to all of you for what you do.